Welcome to Rosie the Reviewer. We're your hosts. I'm Sam.
And I'm Marcia.
And we like World War II media and we want to talk about it. Welcome back to Rosie the Reviewer. This week we're talking about the movie Their Finest, which came out in 2016. It was directed by Lona Scherfig and written by Gabby Cappe, and it's based on the 2009 novel Their Finest Hour and a Half by Lissa Evans, which I believe was retitled Their Finest to match the movie. It's a fictional account of a British Ministry of Information team making a propaganda film about the Dunkirk evacuation. And we are joined this week by the two hosts of another World War II podcast that you all should check out, the Donut Dollies. Hi, Winnie and Gabby. Welcome to Rosie.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for having us.
We're really excited to be here.
And we're very excited to talk about the book and the movie.
So let's give our general impressions. Mart, what did you think of the movie?
I think I'm the only one who hasn't read any part of the book, so the movie is all I have to go on. And I really liked the movie. Or at least I thought I did. And then, no, I'm not gonna lie, I still like it, but I was a little bit shocked by the almost ending of the movie. And I did not see it coming. And it made me a little sad because before a certain point in the movie, I was like, this is going to be my feel-good movie for when I'm sort of sad and I want to get into something happy. And then something happened in the movie and then I was like, oh wait, it's no longer that happy. So yeah, I liked it. I thought the acting was good. The cast is fantastic. I especially liked Bill Nighy. I think he's great. And well, I think I will watch it again. How about you, Woody? What did you think of the movie?
I really enjoyed it. I thought I had seen it before, but it turns out I was getting it mixed up with the Potato Peel Pie Society that has Lily James in it. So when I turned on Their Finest, I said, oh, I haven't actually seen this. So it was a nice surprise. I really enjoyed it. I also loved the cast. I really loved Helen McRory in it because she's always excellent. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I felt the same as you, Marta, where I was like, oh, this is going to be one of those movies that I can watch. And it's super comforting. And then that almost ending, it's so unexpected. If you haven't read the book, you do not expect it to happen. So I was sort of, oh no. And then I was crying, of course, because it was very sad. But yeah, I agree. I would watch it again. But I'm glad I know the ending now. But I wish I had finished the book first, so I could expect it. It was very unexpected, but yes, enjoyable. I liked it.
Well, I also really liked it. I read the book first, and it was also, the ending was pretty unexpected in the book too. And they do a sort of thing where you don't immediately know what has happened to everybody. They sort of give you the aftermath, I guess, in little dribs and drabs. So you're like, oh my God, what happened to Ambrose? What happened to all these different characters? I thought all of the characters were a treat. I really love Ambrose Hilliard in the book and in the movie. I think he's just such a fun, delicious character. I love that there's tons of women with things to do in this book. I think it's particularly interesting how sort of the main character is hired to write the women's dialogue, or quote unquote write the slop, as they call it. And she, as this character, has agency and gets to actually do things. And this book was, of course, written by a female writer. And so it was just really fun to sort of get that side of things a little more than we often do in war media. And yeah, I had a really good time. I highly recommended the book. And I have a few quibbles about the transition into movies. Like there's a few things that they changed where I was like, I don't know about that. But overall, I really enjoyed it. What about you, Gabby?
I really enjoyed the movie. And like you, I read the book before I watched the movie. And I found myself, as I typically do when there's a book and a movie adaptation, is comparing one to the other. And I did, in a sense, prefer, and I know you can't translate everything over to a movie, but I did, in a sense, prefer the book as far as characters being fleshed out more, like just knowing more about Ambrose Hilliard and about Catherine Cole and about Buckley. I just found that you got more of a sense of their personality in the book. And then when I watched the movie, I had a completely different picture of Tom Buckley in my head. Just not good looking Sam Claflin, but a completely different picture in my head. But I did love that there seemed to be this intellectual bond between him and Catherine Cole, which was just, it really drove everything forward in the movie. but it was very feel good, very, you could find yourself watching it over and over again. The ending didn't surprise me, obviously, because I had read the book, but reading the book, I got teary-eyed at that big, what you think is going to be this big, happy ending, and then there's not. I got teary-eyed there in the book. I got teary-eyed at a completely different point in the film. But I did love them both. I think I liked them both equally. I would just, leave it there that I loved them both equally.
Well, that are perfect first impressions, I would say. They're nice and concise. Sometimes we talk for like 10 minutes, but this is good. So I would say let's get into the plot. Take it away, Sam.
It's London in 1940. We're introduced to Tom Buckley, played by Sam Claflin, who they've put glasses on, but there's really no hiding that man's sparkle. And he's a cynical film writer, and he's taking in this really overwrought propaganda reel at the cinema. They used to play these like sort of little propaganda movies at the start of other movies, and, some mixed results. And so he's kind of gauging the audience reaction and seeing how it goes over. And it doesn't seem to be really catching anyone's attention or doing particularly well.
Sam Claflin. What can I say about Sam Claflin that I haven't already been saying in my head? I was like, he does not look very nerdy, even though they've cut his hair all weird and put some glasses on him. But I do like, he's very British. He's acting more British, I think, than he is, which I like. And just the opening of the movie, it's immediately kind of quaint, quirky, and it feels like it's going to be one of those really quiet, delightful movies. And it is, I think it is. So I was excited from the moment it opens. And also, Sam had told me, I think you would like this one, because before I watched this one, we watched one that we weren't too keen on. So this one was a nice change.
I wasn't expecting the opening especially the opening credits, to be like that. And I loved that the foreground was a real movie from that time period. But then I also loved how they brought the two actors forward, and watching it in our time period, you could see the green screen, obviously. But I thought that was so smart and such a great idea to introduce the movie in that way and in that sense. Yeah, I love how Katrine was introduced. I was expecting the actress Gemma to put on the Welsh accent. I thought she would keep her regular accent because I've seen her in a few other things. So that was such a nice surprise. And I think she did it really well. So I was sucked into it instantly.
So yes, we do meet our leading lady, Katrine Cole, played by Gemma Arterton. And she's a young copywriter. She's hired at the Ministry of Information to write the slope, as Sam has already said. It sounds as degrading as it is. But she gets to do that on propaganda reels. But it basically means that she gets to write the romantic dialogue, predominantly geared towards women. So the other writers, which include Buckley and Raymond Parfitt, played by Paul Ritter, warn her about Phil Moore, played by Rachel Sterling, a no-nonsense colleague who only ever seems to bring bad news about the scripts. But she and Catherine will end up being great friends as the film goes on.
Yes, we love some women supporting women. The Ministry of Information where they work had existed in World War I, and then they kind of wound it down, and then they brought it back for World War II, and then they wound it down again in 1946. So it really was there to create propaganda and monitor public opinion. And many people today will know their work if you've ever seen the Keep Calm and Carry On poster that came out of the Ministry of Information. And at this point in the war, a lot of the content that they were making was quote unquote domestic propaganda. So it was kind of like, here's what you do in an air raid. Here's how to cook with rations. Here's how to, do all this kind of stuff that within a year of the war starting, the British public started to find really sort of condescending. And so at that point, the sort of nature of the propaganda changed. But at this point, we're still very much in the early days of treating the public with a degree of contempt when you make these like really obvious propaganda reels, and you kind of get the sense that that's the reaction that they're getting.
Yes, and speaking of the Ministry of Information, it had a division called Home Intelligence, which was set up by a woman called Mary Adams, who was first a broadcaster for the BBC, but as the BBC took on a different role during the war, she moved on to the Ministry of Information and set up the Intelligence Division, where she basically became the one to monitor the public mood. And she also wrote daily reports on British morale, and they were published. So that's one of the women working in World War II at the Ministry of Information. And there were more women, obviously, because most of the men had gone to fight in the war. So some women did profit from, so to speak, the war and the men being away. And she's not the only one, because the character of Catherine was in part based on a woman called Diana Morgan, who was a screenwriter at Ealing Studios. And her granddaughter has said in an interview that she used to be called the Welsh bitch, which is obviously not a very nice thing to say, but she wasn't crying about it at all. And she would give specifically the men like an earful about calling her that. But she came on to Ealing Studios in 1940 as part of the scriptwriting team to produce propaganda films. And one of the biggest ones that she did was When's the Day Well? ? And it told the story of an English village, Bramley End, fighting back after being invaded by the Germans. And it showed both men and women fighting back, which was pretty amazing back in the day. And it included a 30-year-old actress called Thora Hird, who saw her career take off after appearing in the film. And it also featured a very shocking scene, which was waved through by censors, of an elderly postmistress butchering a Nazi with an axe. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh, fuck yeah, I want to watch this movie. Where's that at?
If I can find it on YouTube or something, I'll put it on the website and we can just all enjoy it.
Please.
I at least need a screen cap of the elderly postmistress butchering a Nazi with an axe.
Same.
I need that as a poster or like a canvas print or something, because that sounds
Right.
excellent. I love that.
Keep calm and carry on.
And
Yep.
that's the top. Incredible. Love that.
Yeah, so Buckley tells Katrin about a new movie they're going to be working on about the Dunkirk evacuation, and it's based on, they've heard this story about these twin sisters who stole their dad's boat and went out to participate in the evacuation, and they thought, you know, a movie about these two plucky sisters, that's what everyone needs to see. And so Katrin has to go interview these two sisters, Rose and Lily, played by Francesca and Lily Knight, and when she interviews them, she finds the story is not quite as heroic as she's been led to believe. She's going to have to zhuzh it up a little to make it Hollywood worthy.
We get introduced to, I think, mostly all of our favorite character, Ambrose Hilliard, played by Bill Nighy. He tells his agent, Sammy Smith, played by Eddie Marsan, that he's not interested to play the role of drunk Uncle Frank in a Dunkirk film because he is a very well-known actor, but he's aging, so he maybe doesn't get the roles that he wants anymore, but he ends up being quite remarkable in it, so.
Yeah, he's brilliant. He's just such a character who, he is such a dick to other people, but he has this sort of like crotchety likability to him. I just really enjoyed his character, and just, you know, even in the book, we're getting to read a little more about his motivations and his inner thoughts and everything. Like, I really got a kick out of him.
I enjoyed him quite a bit. He's one of those, like, you know, he's an aging actor who doesn't want to admit that he's an aging actor. And I like that first bit we get of him in the book is that I refuse to take new headshots. Why do I need new headshots? Meanwhile, his headshots are like 30 years old. You don't look like this anymore. But I do like that you can find some humanity in like that you don't want to admit you're aging or you're getting older and you're not quite as, you know, spry anymore. There's some humanity to that. And to see him kind of accept it as the film and the book go on is actually really nice. He was definitely one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, so Katrin and Buckley they're working on the script and they're arguing about the plot quite a bit. So Buckley has a lot more experience with this than Katrin. So he's very like, here's the sort of stereotypical way that this story would go. The dialogue needs to be really snappy. We're allotting this much time for the romance, this much time for the whatever. And Katrin wants it to be a little more realistic. Like, she wants to keep the sisters in the spotlight. She wants their dialogue to be meaningful in some way. So yeah, they're constantly going back and forth. It's a bit rom-com-y. Like, you can definitely tell in the movie in a way that I think was not obvious in the book necessarily, that they're going to be paired together eventually in a romantic way. And then, yeah, the Ministry of Information, they find out that the sisters didn't actually quite make it to Dunkirk. And they're a little pissed about this initially, but they decide to proceed with the film anyway, because it's probably going to be good for morale. And yeah, constantly while they're working on it, they're hearing from various parties in the military and the government who always have notes about, well, we can't say that the motor broke because that says bad things about British engineering and that'd be bad for morale. Or we can't say this or that because it would be bad for morale. So they're definitely getting lots of outside input that they don't necessarily want.
So Catherine is quote unquote married, and she's in an unhappy relationship with her husband, who's a painter called Alice Cole, played by Jack Houston. He's an injured veteran. Is he a veteran? He is a veteran, right?
I believe so. It's not really made obvious in the movie. I'm not so sure about the book, but it's not made particularly obvious. He's wearing a uniform in the movie. I've just completely blanked on what it is.
Well, I think he works as an artist painting the result of the bombing. Like, I think that's an official capacity of some kind. So he is working, quote unquote, for the military.
I think I remember them saying that in the book that he did serve, and then they give him like a limp in the movie.
Yeah.
So I think there's some kind of nod to an old war injury in the movie that's maybe not so clear in the book.
Yeah.
But that's why he's home, and he's going to have a showing of his art at the National Gallery, which means he has to travel to paint the aftermath of the bombing raids. And they argue about this because she wants to stay behind in London. She's just gotten a job she's quite proud of, and she wants to keep doing it.
Yeah, and this does happen in the book, but I do find that the movie makes Ellis probably more invested in the relationship than he is in the book. Like, in the book, it's very much like, she's around, and he's like, oh, great, I have a wife, cool, I'm going to go do my own shit.
Can you tell me a little bit about the changes between the book and the movie, in the sense, because you told me this before you started recording, just for the record, about how Catherine has a different motivation for being with Alice than she has for her interest in Buckley, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in the book particularly, it's quite obvious that she's with Ellis because she was drawn to his physical charisma. And when she ran away with him, she was young and naive and swept up in the romance of it. And we as an audience can already tell that there's these problems, right? Like, they're not really married. She bought her own wedding ring because she was very invested, far more than he ever was. And then it sort of contrasts against this relationship she has with Tom Buckley, who's a bit of an older guy, like not necessarily that obviously good looking, who's quite quick-witted, and they're really a good match intellectually. And in the book, when he eventually makes a move on her, she thinks it's a joke at first because they're such good friends. And when she reacts in that way, he's obviously very upset about that. And because it's really the first time she's seen him be like vulnerable and real with her, coming out from behind this facade of sarcasm and banter. And I feel like you get this contrast between someone that she chose because of their physical attraction and someone that's more of an intellectual match for her. And I feel like we lose that a little bit in the movie simply because they did cast Sam Claflin as Tom Buckley. No,
I agree. And I like that more so in the book, you get the sense of who Buckley might be, because when he makes that move on her and she thinks it's a joke, he says, "You think me an old fool." If Sam Claflin is to deliver that line in a movie, it's not going to hit the same way because he's just not.
Yes.
He's too good looking for that. He's too good looking to deliver that kind of line. I also had a completely different picture of Buckley in my head while I was reading the book. You know, even before he says that line, I just kind of had this kind of maybe, overly pomade hair, greasy mustache, like a bit of a heavier set, maybe a portly gentleman, like significantly older than her. And then, especially because Phil makes that comment, Phyllis, does he make smart comments to you and try to grab your rear end? And Catherine's like, no. So you're kind of like, oh, maybe he's not interested in her that way, that he just sees her as a work companion. But they just completely throw that at you in the book. And I was like, oh, he is into her that way. It's interesting to see it played both ways, like book and movie.
I didn't get the sense of anything was going to happen between them in the movie. I know that it was supposed to be sort of an enemies to lovers type situation, but I just thought that Katrine maybe annoyed him. So I didn't see it coming. Like when it got to that point, and Gabby and I had the discussion about the part of the book that I had read and then watching the movie following on from that, I said that I didn't expect it, even though the underlying tone is always there. And then Gabby told me that it doesn't happen until much later in the book. Like, you don't get a sense of his attraction to her. But then the way that Gabby described how he is spoken of in the book. So when they picked Sam Claflin, I can't say anything bad about Sam Claflin. I love him. We grew up very near each other. One of my close friends is very close with him and his family. So I have nothing bad to say about him.
Yeah, I actually wondered where he was going to fall in the casting because I waited till I was done with the book to watch the movie. I'm like, who did they cast him as? And then I'm thinking, did they cast him as Arthur, the military advisor in the book that just never appears in the movie? And then I was very surprised to see him cast as Tom Buckley. I said, oh,
very taken aback.
This is the route we're going. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think by any means that he poorly acted the role, but I do think he was perhaps a little miscast.
Yes.
Just a bit.
I would have put him as someone in the propaganda movie. I would have predicted him as like Johnny in the propaganda movie, or even as, I've forgotten his name, the American...
Lundback. Yeah, the American.
The guy from The Office. He's in The Office's plot. So that was excellent. But I would have put him as that. I thought, oh, he's just going to stick on an American accent and hope for the best. But no, they put him as the gentleman they describe as old, greasy and portly, all of the things that Sam Claflin is famously not. So that was, yes, I agree with Sam. He did it well, but I don't think he should have been even spoken about for the role. That's my opinion on that one.
Yeah, age-wise, I had him in line with Parfit. Yeah.
We get to meet Sophie Smith, played by the incomparable Helen McCrory, who is no longer with us, but she's always fucking knocks it out of the park in everything she's been in. So it's always a treat to find something that I haven't seen yet and see her pop up. She tells Ambrose that her brother Sammy, who is Ambrose's agent, has died in a bombing, and Ambrose has to go and identify Sammy. And this scene was also in the book, which I found very emotionally affecting, where he's going to identify Sammy, who's missing some fingers on one of his hands. And Ambrose used to play this guy who mentored a detective on TV. So he has this whole thing where when he sees the body, all the fingers are there. So he's like, but you see, this can't be my friend because he has all of his fingers and Sammy didn't have all of his fingers. And he's, feeling so pleased with himself. And then the woman who works there gets such a terrible look on her face. And she's like, oh, we try and make the bodies complete for the families. Like, we assumed that he had all his fingers and we found some fingers. So we, and then he realizes that, yes, it is Sammy who has died in the bombing. So a very sad little scene, and tells you a lot about Ambrose as a character, I think. So Sophie tells Ambrose that she's going to be taking over the agency, and she's quite a bit more no nonsense than Sammy. She says she doesn't keep actors on the payroll who don't work. And so Ambrose must reluctantly take on the Dunkirk role, even though he thinks it's beneath him.
That scene is just, you almost forget that the Blitz is going on for a little bit in the beginning of the movie. That the Blitz is happening and it takes its first real victim in our main cast. And it's pretty effective to remind you that they might not be at war, but they're still in the war.
I think that was something in the book that I not enjoyed more of, but you get pulled into the war a little bit more. There's more instances of the Blitz is happening all around them. And I think maybe it's because there were more characters in the book that we didn't get in the movie, and you can see each one separately affected by the Blitz. Like, you get a moment where each character is affected in some way by the Blitz.
Yeah, I think the author did a really good job of painting this really vivid world of the home front in 1940. I really liked that.
The Secretary of War, played by Jeremy Irons, again, a big actor in this movie, tells them that the Americans won't be motivated to get into the war with the film as is. So they are instructed to write a role for an all-American hero pilot, Carl Lundback, played by Jake Lacy. Everyone likes him, but he can't act to save his life.
Yeah, so the Secretary of War, he's unnamed, but he's probably meant to be Anthony Eden, who is the Secretary of State for War from May to December 1940. Eden had resigned as Foreign Secretary in 1938 in protest of Chamberlain's appeasement policy. And he ended up being appointed Secretary of State for War once Churchill became Prime Minister. And then at the end of 1940, Eden sort of returned to his former post in the Foreign Office. I thought it was interesting if it is meant to represent him, since he was pretty well known to be critical of Churchill prioritizing the relationship with the US at the expense of other allies. And of course, in the future, he'll go on to be prime minister in Churchill's wake in 1955. And we did do an episode on The Darkest Hour, which is about Churchill and the Dunkirk evacuation and all that kind of stuff. So you can definitely go check that out if you want to hear more about that.
What do we think about Jake Lacy and his role as Golden Pack?
I thought he was excellent. I like him anyway in the few things I've seen him in. I do feel like in a lot of things he's very typecast, but I'm glad in this he played a bit of a himbo because I just enjoy a himbo, truly. I thought he was very funny. He killed it. He did really good. I don't like him with that bright blonde hair, though. He should have kept his regular hair color. But yeah, I thought he was very good. I enjoyed him in this. I enjoy him in The Office. There was something else I've seen him in where he was also great, but the show itself was not good. Yes, I thought he was very good.
I really got a kick out of the scenes where because the character that he's playing is a terrible actor. So I really got a kick out of the scenes where we're seeing that. And, you see him turn to the other actor and he's like, no, don't go out there. And this really like overwrought voice. And then he turns and smiles directly into the camera. Very funny.
He's trying to break the fourth wall. Look at me. It was, it shows how good of an actor he is that he can play a bad actor so well that I cringed every time I heard him speak because he was trying so hard to be this all-American hero. And then in the end, didn't they have to dub him for the Dunkirk movie? They had to dub over him anyway.
Listen, he's just there to look pretty. He's like the male version of the bimbo that we usually get subjected to, so.
Exactly.
Yeah. And he's there to motivate the Americans to get into the war, I suppose. But I feel like you get a bit more depth about it in the book where they rewrite a bunch of his scenes so that when his back is to the camera, that's when his dialogue happens so that they can just dub in his dialogue. And actually in the book, it's Ambrose who dubs in all of his dialogue, and Ambrose doesn't want to at first. And then he sort of gets talked into it because it's like, oh, well, you'll get paid extra, you'll get credited, etc.
Ruthless. Turn his back to the camera and dub over him. Just ruthless.
I found it very funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there are various small snags as they progress to filming on location on the beach. Obviously not at Dunkirk, but at the beach in England. And Katrin saves the day by beefing up the role for Uncle Frank in exchange for Ambrose teaching Carl how to say his lines. And there's this whole bit in the book where Carl asks Ambrose himself, he's like, look, can you teach me how to act? And Ambrose is like, teach you to act. This is my profession. There's a lifetime of work that goes into knowing how to act, etc. And then he's like, well, can you just tell me how to say the lines and I'll repeat after you kind of thing. So there's this really funny scene in the movie as well where Ambrose says the line and then Carl tries to repeat it after him in exactly the same voice.
I like that it was in the movie, it was Katrin kind of presenting that opportunity to Ambrose, like, hey, if you do this, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Because I think it opened up the door for that kind of, you think you see more of the humanity of Ambrose because he starts to kind of not grow protective of Katrin, but they kind of form this very unexpected friendship where the minute something goes wrong for him, he's looking for her. Mm-hmm. He's looking for her. And I like that kind of came to a culmination. I'm not going to ruin the end because we're not there yet, but I like that kind of wrapped itself up nicely with a bow at the end of the movie. Whereas in the book, there is like literally none of that. Like there is no Katrin and Ambrose relationship or friendship at all. So it was a nice change in the dynamic in the film for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I liked it.
I feel like they make Katrin kind of the glue between all the other characters. Like she has a relationship with everybody that's there in one way or another. So it's quite nice. I also like, and I don't think we've named them in our notes, but I like the fact that they show you obviously different actors for the people that are in the propaganda movie as well. Like the twins are cast. One of them is Claudia Jessie, who I didn't even recognize at first, but I love her. I think she's great. And I find it a really interesting subject for a movie to be about movie making. Like we get a little bit of that in Inglourious Basterds in a very different way.
It's very meta.
Katrin rushes to Alice's exhibition, which she almost misses, but she kind of has to make some arrangements to get away from work. And then when she gets home, she catches him in bed with another woman and they break up. And there's a quote in the movie where Alice says, "That's the first time I painted you. I shouldn't have painted you walking away. And that's what he does in the film. He always paints her into his scenes, but always walking away. And she replies, "No, that's not it, Alice. You shouldn't have made me so bloody small." And it's kind of sad. Like, it's a really sad scene.
It's extremely sad, and I felt that even though a lot of the things she did was to sort of not protect him, but she bought her own wedding ring and they never were officially married legally. She sacrificed so much for him, you know, leaving her family, moving to London to be with him. She sacrificed a lot and she got nothing back from it. In terms of that relationship, she received no. I feel like with him, it was a lot of her giving and him taking. So when I got to that scene in the movie, I was disappointed, not surprised. I knew it would be a case of you weren't giving me enough attention or you're at work too much. There was no excuse for it for what he does, but it was his typical manly behavior, I think.
But it really shows her strength in just walking away immediately.
Yeah, there was like zero hesitation on her part.
Zero hesitation. Yeah. She ditches her wedding ring. She takes it off, ditches it in like a lake or a fountain or something, and she just walks away.
Yeah,
and
picks up her bags and goes.
I think,
goes right on the train.
You and I always say this, a strong woman is, especially in that era. I mean,
yes, absolutely.
They were all over. You just had to look for them.
Yeah.
I think definitely. That it's interesting that the more she gets into this world of Hollywood, of making movies, of fantasy and make-believe, and even more sense than usual because they're making this propaganda movie about a story that's not quite true. And they're getting all these notes from all these various other entities within the government being like, make it like this. No, make it like this, that sort of thing. And the more she gets into this world of make-believe, the more the kind of blinders fall off and she perceives the reality of her own life a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Buckley and Katrin have a moment in the moonlight. Because she's, single and ready to mingle now. But of course, they don't live happily ever after. They have a little argument and he has all these thoughts about her relationship with Alice and she's pretty defensive about it. And then they sort of take a little break from each other and Buckley's really out of sorts because of this argument. And he is supposed to write a new ending for the film, but he's really struggling and he's having a hard time kind of finding his voice.
I liked that they didn't immediately give them their moment together. I like that they put a little conflict in there because there's conflict in it for Katrin, I guess, with Alice, but there has not been any conflict for Buckley in the movie, so it's nice to also see him having to work through that first. It makes the payoff a little bit better, I think. But yeah, they do have great chemistry, Sam Claflin and Gemma Arterton. I think Gemma Arterton is such a soft-spoken, gentle actress, and she fits the role really well. Because even though she's soft-spoken, she's determined in that way, and I quite like how they portray that you can also be soft-spoken and still get stuff done. Because very often they'll cast someone who's really out there, or really self-confident and really loud, and she's not loud. She just says what she needs to say when she needs to say it, and it works for her, and I quite like that. Katrin writes the new ending as well as a new version of the scene, quote-unquote, where she and Buckley argued. She leaves it on his desk for him to find because she really regrets the way they parted, and when she returns home, her house has been destroyed in one of the worst nights of the bombing yet. So that's another instance of the Blitz for you.
Yeah. So in 1940, towards the end of the Battle of Britain, which was the first major military campaign fought entirely in the air, the Germans developed this new strategy of conducting massive bombing raids against UK cities. And the goal was to attempt to bait more British fighters into the air so that they could try and wholesale destroy the RAF. And this campaign was known as the Blitz, which is short for Blitzkrieg, to refer to a surprise attack. This sort of started in September of 1940 and carried on for about 8 months. At one point early on, London was bombed for 56 out of 57 nights in a row. And though 40,000 civilians were killed and more than 1 million homes were destroyed, of course, also including warehouses and shipyards and military munitions factories and all that kind of stuff, it didn't really materially impact the British war effort. Buckley turns up at the studio, having read the apology pages that Katrin left on his desk, and they have a little makeout. And then, unfortunately, moments later, it's not to last, because this large studio light that the crew have sort of been struggling with crashes down, killing Buckley in a terrible workplace accident. And it made me think of this conversation they had earlier in the movie where they're talking about someone who's died, and Katrin says, it must be worse when they die for no reason. And Buckley says, well, it's always for no reason.
I want to cry just again because the way the scene is shot, you don't really know if he's dead for like 2 seconds, and then they just show him being carried away on a stretcher with like a drape over him. You're like, no, this can't be true. They've just gotten their moment. This cannot be happening right now. The timing of this is wrong. And also, it would have been Katrin going that way because Ambrose had called for her, and he goes instead because he knows that if Katrin goes, that Ambrose will keep her, and he wants her to himself for a little bit longer. So it's like totally unfair that he dies, and also unexpected and very sad. And I hate it. Yeah. Don't do it again.
They say it comes in threes, and it was one thing after another for Katrin. Like, she finds out Ellis is in bed with someone else, and then she loses her home. And then right after that, the man that she is in love with dies. So I thought that was kind of sick on everyone's part. I wanted the instant gratification of them being happy together after these horrible events had taken place one by one. And then they said, actually, no. And they just kick you in the stomach with that. It was very, very sad. And I felt it was also extremely unfair that unfortunately things do come in threes. And for Katrin, it was 1, 2, 3 instantly, one day after the next. So that almost made it a bit sadder. Like, she's just seen the man that she loves die in a freak accident. And then second of all, she's gone through the past 3 days of having now no husband and no home. And now she has nowhere to go or anyone to be with. So yeah, the unfairness made me extremely sad too.
Well, it certainly saves it from being a predictable rom-com, I suppose.
That is very true. Yeah. That was one thing I was afraid of going into the movie, where I was like, oh, it's enemies to lovers and oh, they're going to end up together, and I could do the chain of events off the top of my head. So not that I'm giggling and kicking my feet over the fact that Buckley dies so tragically, but I liked that they slipped that in. I had to like hold on to my armchair kind of moment, like, oh my God, because I didn't get there in the book until I didn't get there at all. But it's all right. It wasn't expected for me.
I was almost expecting something to happen to them both in the Blitz, but not this. Like, this just freak accident wasn't in my head at all. Part of me also thought, wait, is this just a scene in a movie that they're imagining is happening? But no, he actually did die.
I thought that too, because the lighting for that specific part where he begins to walk backwards is the same sort of filter and lighting they use for the propaganda movie. So I also assumed visually that we had gone back to the propaganda movie, and I was like, oh, he's not really dead. And as they carry him out, you see the lights change back to the natural light as the camera turns back to Katrin, which I thought was an excellent visual. I thought that was so well thought out, that they had made the propaganda movie light, and then as it turns to her reaction, the light completely changes back to the real life of it. So I thought that was a really good choice.
Oh, the settling in of her new reality. Yeah. Absolutely. It's like looking at it happening through rose-colored glasses, and then you take them off and you're like, wait, it actually happened.
Very smart. Yeah, very clever.
Despite being really devastated and grieving, Katrin reports back to work because Ambrose was also hurt in the accident, and they can't film the scene they wanted. So Katrin gets the ending she wanted all along, with the sisters saving themselves, which is a nice touch, but also, again, very sad because it just reminds you of what happened.
I loved it because so much of the propaganda posters, for example, that you see of women at the time is very like, women are crucial to the war effort, comma, supporting the man's job. She's going to come and do the man's job. She's supporting the man. It's all about women in context to what the men are doing. And even in this movie, there's this reference to like when Katrin is fighting for the sisters to be the heroes, she gets told, well, women want a hero. They don't want to be a hero. That kind of messaging in the propaganda of the time. And then we get this ending on the movie where it sort of falls into place where actually the women do get to be the heroes. So I did kind of enjoy that.
And Buckley would have too. Probably, hopefully.
Well, he's kind of the one who wasn't letting her have that ending in the first place, but...
Don't say that, not too lightly.
Let me live in my dream world for 2 seconds.
Exactly.
Yeah, so Ambrose is visited by his agent, Sophie, in the hospital. It seems like there's much work ahead for him, lots of new opportunities, including a little romance. And once he's well, he visits Katrin and persuades her to work on his new project with him. And he tells Katrin that they're in this sort of narrow window of time wherein there are a lot more opportunities for quote unquote people like them than there would be otherwise because all of the young men are away. And we also find out that Rose and Lily, the two sisters upon whom the film was based, they were inspired by their own movie and they ran away to join the ATS, the Auxiliary Territorial Service. So they're doing their bit.
Yeah, this scene with Ambrose is so sweet when he comes to visit her, and she's still so heartbroken. He's himself, but he's also a little softer, so I like it.
He's not as cocky as he was at the beginning of the movie. I feel like when we're first introduced to him, he still feels like he's this young, spry, very sought after actor. And I think a part of him believes that he is the spy that he played or the detective he played in his early days. And I think taking on this role, albeit he took it with no choice, I think it somehow made him mature a tiny bit in terms of seeing life for its realities. Even though he says he wasn't my friend, he was my agent when he identifies the body towards the middle of the movie, it seems like he is the only true friend that he had. So I think his storyline is so good purely for the fact that even though he's older than the rest of them, he grows the most, I think.
I was a little disappointed. I understand why they did it, of course, because there just simply is not enough time to cover everything. But Sophie is not his love interest in the book. His love interest is this woman called Ceci that he worked with. You see him at the beginning of the film when he's working on a propaganda movie with this older lady. And like that's his love interest in the book. And I kind of liked it because they're both sort of aging stars and they speak each other's language, so to speak. He shows up to see one of her performances and he's late. So he lies and tells her that he's like, oh, you really hit your mark. You really got a laugh on that one, etc. And I really enjoyed that because they're both sort of an odd fit as people. And that's kind of one of the themes of this book. All of the pairings that end up together are a little bit sort of odd couples. And I really liked that. So, I mean, it's not terrible that he ended up with Sophie. I understand, she's the female character in his age group that appears in the film. So I get it. But yeah, I was a little disappointed not to see the book love story on the screen just because I thought it was very cute and quaint.
No, I liked the pairing of Ambrose and Cece in the book. And I like that he wouldn't acknowledge it, that she was really his love interest. He kept making digs at her appearance and her age as if he wasn't graying and wrinkling and aging himself. He just kept making digs, like he wouldn't let himself acknowledge it. And then at the end, he just lets her in, which I think is so sweet in the book. But I did, like I said earlier, I liked the bit of humanity they gave him in the movie. Like he does have a heart. There's, not a cold, empty pocket in his chest. He is a human being with feelings. And it was nice to see him continue that bond with Katrin. And it was nice to see that at the end, it really did wrap up the strong woman. Katrin carries on. She sits behind Buckley's typewriter. She picks up his job and does it on her own. And the twins join the ATS. And it's like they find the power and the strength to move on without a man. And I love that. I love that.
Hell yeah.
So near the end of the movie, Katrin attends a showing of the Dunkirk movie that they've made in the cinema, which is quite emotionally affecting given how much silliness went into making it. And they got their authenticity and optimism after all that they were looking for. The film ends with Katrin working on Ambrose's new project with Perfect and Phil, so it is a happy ending for Katrin. And I do really like the scene in the cinema because the people are so moved by it. And it made me cry maybe harder than Buckley's death.
Well, and it's really a contrast, right, to the reel that Buckley is taking in the very first scene of the movie where people are not paying attention and they're not inspired and they're not finding it interesting or entertaining. And then we get to see this movie where, in spite of everything that happened making it, people are really finding something in it that they can grasp onto.
Despite having Lundberg, who doesn't know how to act. But he does save a dog, though, so let's be fair. Everybody likes when a dog gets saved.
Exactly.
Yes.
I particularly enjoyed that ending scene in the cinema because Katrina sat between a soldier and this lovely lady who the man next to her says, if you watch it a second time, you'll find something to laugh at. And then the lady next to her says, I've seen it 5 times and I've cried every time, so I don't know what he's talking about. So yeah, it goes back to everyone finds something different in that particular film. And it wraps up very nicely that even though there was so much tragedy and devastation in her personal life and going on in the world around her, Katrine achieved so much in such a short space of time, and it's so well received and everyone loves it. So I think that is something that would have stayed with her as a person and spurred her on to continue. Even if Ambrose hadn't asked her specifically to write his part in this next movie, I think she would have been spurred on by the response that she witnesses herself.
Yeah, they're making jokes, the writers, about quote unquote authenticity and optimism, but like that was kind of her vibe the whole time. She's like, I do want this story to be kind of real. I don't want us to be sidelining the sisters or making this silly, even though they're making a propaganda movie. She did want there to be something real in there, and that's what she got. And she got to see other people pick up on that.
And that's the end of the movie.
It's a great movie. Everybody should watch it. It's one of those, feel-good movies, apart from that little blip towards the end of now I'm crying for the last half an hour.
That was the bit at the end, right? So Buckley dying in the book, that's where I'm sitting there crying. The end, Katrin in the theater watching it, I ran right into the bathroom for a Kleenex. I was like, oh my God.
I liked that part too. I'm like, oh, her work was fulfilling and meaningful after all.
Exactly.
So we do have some notes, not very many because we've already told you a lot of notes, but Sam, take it away.
I thought it was neat. The author of the book, Lissa Evans, has a little cameo in the movie. So early on, there's a scene where Ambrose is working on a different propaganda movie and he's kind of being snarky with everyone. And he has all these notes on the script and there's this makeup lady fussing over him. And that's Lissa Evans wearing a wig and, you know, a fun little outfit.
Really cool. I love movie trivia. That. Honestly, after I watch any movie, I will then go on IMDb and look up every single piece of trivia about the movie I just watched. And I did it with this. And I didn't spot that one. I think I just glazed over it. So that's really cool because I love movie trivia. So yeah, that's cool.
We'll have to go back and watch it again.
Let's do it again.
Let's do it over again. Yeah.
So I looked up what other women I could find that were working in the propaganda scene at the time. And one of the bigger ones I could find was a woman called Kai Mander. Funnily enough, in 1935, secured a job as a secretary at Joseph Goebbels' International Film Congress in Berlin. So this is before the war, which is, you know, to be in Berlin and be at that specific film festival must be strange. And then later in 1940s, she started working for what was called the Shell Film Company and for the Ministry of Home Security. And there she directed around 50 instructional and promotional films for the UK and also overseas. And during the war, she actually moved up from doing like continuity work in the movie industry to being a director. So that's another one of those. When the men are away, the women get to do some cool stuff.
That is pretty cool, despite the fact of who she worked for initially.
I'm not sure how to interpret that. I'm like, did she secure a job as a secretary, comma, at the film festival? Like she got a job, like working somewhere else while she was at the film festival?
I think that's the case. I don't know for sure.
Like, I don't get the impression that she actually worked for Goebbels, but
No, but she did find her job there. And I think she also found like a lot of connections from the UK industry that then later led to her being part of the Ministry of Home Security. But it's just interesting to me that Joseph Goebbels, he's such a big person in the propaganda scene. Like, if you know anything about him, he made so many crazy propaganda movies for Germany.
Well, we talked about him in our Sonny Boy episode because he was the one who made the Nazi Titanic movie.
Yes, he did. Wow. I feel like we need to just briefly update the dollies on this.
Please, because I am.
There was this big German cruise liner, and then during the war, Goebbels was like, I want to make a Nazi version of the Titanic story. So he did. And then when he saw the screening of it, he's like, this is too sad. It's going to be bad for morale. No one can ever see it. And so the movie sort of got shelved. And then a couple of years later, the boat that they had used as the Titanic, it was at sea. It was basically used as, towards the end of the war, when they were moving POWs and concentration camp prisoners out of the way of the coming Russians and Americans. They reached a point where they got to the sea and they didn't have anywhere to put them. So they put like 5,000 POWs and concentration camp prisoners on this big boat that looked like the Titanic. And the Allies saw it from the air and thought it was a military ship. And they bombed the shit out of it, and like almost everyone died.
Oh my God, that's horrific.
It's really just, it was one of those fuck ups by the Brits that is really like, historians still really don't quite know if people knew, but they must have known at least a little bit about it. So
that was a roller coaster, by the way. I didn't think it was going to go any way that you were saying there. I was like, oh, it's just a movie. No.
I know. I remember talking about it, and I was reading about, because one of the characters in the book that we had read like dies in the bombing, and then I was thinking about it, and I was like, wait, is that the same boat that was in Nazi Titanic? And I like looked it up, and I'm like, it was.
It's the same one. Jesus,
my God,
what a story! Jeez,
right? Well, we should rate this movie. Do you have any thoughts, Mart? What should we rate it out of?
Good question. I think we maybe should rate it out of the thrown away fish and chips out of 10, maybe. We didn't talk about it in the plot, after all.
Well, you can talk about it now.
I will talk about it now. There's a scene where Katrin and Buckley are sitting on like a bench, and she's eating, or he's eating fish and chips. And they're kind of playfully bantering, and then she picks up his fish and chips and just chucks it into the sea. And then later, that's what you see in the movie, the propaganda movie at the very end. So I remember when I was watching the movie, Sam said to me, when I was mentioning the scene, she said, rope a little bow around that because it's coming back. And it did. And it's so sweet.
That's cute.
So I'm gonna rate this movie maybe 8.5 thrown away bags of fish and chips out of 10 because I just really found it quite delightful. And I think I will watch it again, and it will be my comfort movie, even though it has a sad ending. And it's interesting to see a movie about the propaganda making machine without it being too on the nose. It's still a feel-good movie, and it's still a war movie, but it's not a particularly sad war movie, nor a very heavy one. So I enjoyed that for once. Who's next?
Oh, I'll go. I would rate it an 8 out of 10 bags of fish and chips thrown away. I thought that it was delightful. It was very sweet. I will say I did enjoy the tiny bit of conflict because everything was going a bit too well. I would watch it again. Yeah, I think it would go also on my little comfort movie list, apart from, the sad events that take place. Yeah.
We can just pretend those didn't happen, okay?
Yeah, we'll just forget. Or we'll just skip it.
Yeah, I think it's a really well-made movie. I recommended it to my mom, actually, who's probably listening. Hi, Mom. Because I think that you could get into it even if you're not really into war media. I think there's a little something for everybody. The characters are really vivid and interesting. The sort of world that's built around them is really effectively constructed. I thought the book was really good. And I did like the movie as an adaptation as well. So I'm going to give it, I think I'll also give it 8.5 bags of chips thrown in the sea out of 10. I always love when there are female characters that have lots to do and are really richly written and are different from each other and all have their own very well articulated motivations and everything. I thought that the author did a great job and it translated well into the movie too.
I would probably go with, I think 8 out of 10 fish and chips. I loved the movie. I loved that it was a war movie, but it wasn't a particularly gruesome war movie. You weren't really pulled into like the battle of the war. You were reminded that life was still going on for the people that lived in London. They were living through the Blitz, but they were still living through it. There was still grocery shopping to be done and daily chores and work. And I liked that it kept that kind of levity. I did miss certain parts that were in the book that we didn't get in the movie, but I would watch it again. And I would recommend it, definitely. I really enjoyed it.
Well, I think now is the time to ask everybody, what are you reading? Or are you reading anything you want to talk about?
A plethora currently.
Well,
Over in the Clubmobile, we have a book club. So come check that out. We put that on our Instagram and our stories and stuff. Currently, of the 4 books we have for the quarter, I'm currently back in the middle of Damn Lucky by Kevin Mora. It's the story of John Lucky Luckadoo of the 100th Bomb Group. And I'm about to restart American Fly Girl, the story of Wasp Hazel Ying Lee. And that is by our friend Susan Tate Ankeny. And it's an excellent book. And Hazel was an incredible person. It's one of those books that I want to shove into everybody's hands and say, read it, because she was excellent and such a sparkle of a person that it makes her story so enjoyable that you feel like she's your friend because it's just so well written.
yeah. I am currently reading Spitfires by Becky Aikman, which is the real story of the American women who flew with the ATA during the war. And it's very interesting because we've done a plethora of research on the WASP. So it's very interesting to see the other side of the American women who flew during the war and how they had more freedom with the ATA, but I'm finding less friendship. Whereas the women in the WASP, because they went through these Army Air Force training courses for, I think it was like 6 or 8 weeks before they were graduated and given their wings, they became like family. So it's very interesting to see how 2 very diverse groups of American women with one very similar passion, which is flying and serving in the war, can just be very different. And it's interesting to see Jackie Cochran at the epicenter of all of it and how she's portrayed in the ATA through their eyes versus how the WASP saw her. So I'm really looking forward to continuing on with it. So look out for a review on that one very soon.
Nice. I don't remember if I talked about this already. I'm sort of working my way through several different books because I'm also studying at the same time. So forgive me if I did already mention it on a previous pod, but I'm reading The Whole Picture, the colonial story of the art in our museums and why we need to talk about it by Alice Proctor. I picked it up when I went to Scotland for a wedding this summer. I went to Kelvin Grove Museum with George, our SAS Rogue Heroes correspondent, and they recommended this book. And it's super interesting. It's almost like a written museum tour where the author takes you through all these different items and paintings and objects in museums and then talks about sort of what they represent in terms of like colonization and imperialism and all that stuff. So it's super interesting.
I can confirm that you've not talked about this on another episode. So, first time.
Nice.
I'm not reading anything. I've been under the weather for quite some time, so I cannot read much. So it's just watching movies and TV shows for me.
Nice.
That's a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good deal. I would do the same.
There's worse things to be doing.
Exactly.
Sure.
Exactly.
Can I ask you girls another question?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, shoot.
If our listeners are going to listen to your podcast, which episode should they listen to?
Ooh.
Okay.
Well,
Okay. I have a couple of favorite.
let's see if our favorites are the same.
Probably the same. One of my top favorites is our episode with Harriet Leach, who played Tatty Spats in Masters of the Air. That was so fun, and she has become such a wonderful friend. Our 3-part series on the WASP, where we were lucky enough to speak with Dr. Kate Landeck, who wrote The Women with Silver Wings, and Susan Tate Ankeny, who I mentioned wrote American Fly Girl. That 3-part series was such a labor of love that we're still carrying on today. And I'm super proud of the fact that we had really just started doing the pod together and we instantly got stuck into something like that. Recent favorite, this is like top 3. My recent favorite is our episode with Jacqueline Basilone, who is the great niece of John Basilone. She is so fun and funny and everything I believe that John would have privately been had he survived the war. And again, she has become such a wonderful friend to Gabby and I. Like, we're all little besties, and it's really sweet. And
the group text is fun.
Yeah.
The group text is fun.
But yeah, we have a few that are excellent, but those are my top ones. That's where I would start, is with The Wasp.
I would go with that as well. But I would also throw in, I really enjoyed the episode you and I did on our own on Rosie the Riveters. And I thought that was a lot of fun to dive into. And I had a great time learning about these women. I would also add in our episode with Dan Rosenthal.
Yeah, that's one of our most recent ones.
This is like, asking somebody to pick their favorite child. But I would add in the episode with Dan. Dan is quite possibly the sweetest human being. And he's got a very dry sense of humor. So
he's so funny. And
he's very, very funny. And he's very, I think, happy. I think he's very proud to be Rosie and Phyllis's son. And it comes across in the way that he speaks so highly of his parents. And it was nice. I mean, everybody knows the story of Rosie Rosenthal. Everybody knows that he re-upped twice and served 3 tours with the 100th. But learning about Phyllis was just the absolute treat of a lifetime. And I adore Dan. So nothing but love for that family.
Yeah, they're great. And it's every single person we meet is sort of like becoming a member of this little family that we create. And I feel like if you are a new listener, you will hear that from us and you'll hear that from the guest, is that we are always, by the end of it, it feels like we've been talking to a best friend for an hour. And we're lucky enough that it carries on post recording. So
I say it all the time that the World War II historical community is such a niche community, and that everybody within it is so kind because history is important. History must be preserved. And to help tell the story of people who aren't here to tell their own stories anymore, everybody that we come across and everybody that we sit down and talk to is just so nice. Nothing bad to say about anybody. Everybody has just been so nice, and we're very lucky to be part of it. Very lucky.
And I love that we have done this together as well, because again, there's that thing of everyone we meet sort of becomes part of this tiny family that we create. And we're so happy to have done this with you guys. This has been so fun. And I hope we can do it again. It was great.
Next time you guys come to us.
Yes.
Yeah. Sounds good.
So I guess all that's left is for me to thank you both for being on so much. This was really fun.
It was fun. I had a lot of fun.
This was great. I had a lot of fun. Thank you for having us.
First of all, where can we find you, Dollies?
Gabby, go ahead.
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts, and on YouTube. And you can also find us on Instagram and Facebook at the Donut Dollies podcast. We have coffee and donuts. Come on over.
We're very nice. Promise.
So I would like to thank everybody for listening. You can find us wherever you get your podcast. You can follow us on Instagram at Rosie the Reviewer podcast. You can send this episode to a friend, to other people who need to join the Clubmobile and who need to listen to Rosie, and to everybody who likes a good rom-com. And maybe to all the guy friends who think they're not going to like this movie, because I think they might anyway, like secretly. And if you want, you can rate us 5 stars, or you can find us on IMDb, which is pretty cool. And if you want more information about us or the Dollies, I'm going to put some links on our website, rosiethereviewer.com. See you next week.
Bye.